So recently I tried this fun little setup where I connected my drum machine, the Roland TR-6S, to the Aputure MC Pros and controlled them via Resolume. So each one of my instruments actually plays, is represented by a light. And I thought I'd share this technique and the setup of it. And while I think that nobody will have this exact same setup because it's very specific, there are some different techniques in there that could be quite useful. And so I'm also going to add the chapter markers below, just because we're going to cover like a lot of different topics. And you can also just pick out the ones that maybe, are suitable for you. Because on the one hand, we're going to cover on how to connect the Aputure MC Pro over DMX with Resolume. And that goes for any wireless DMX lights. So that can be Astera tubes or, again, in this case, the MCs. Then we have the topic of connecting the Roland TR-6S, the drum machine, over MIDI to Resolume. So we can actually send triggers from all of our different drum patterns. And and then how to bring it all together. So let's dive right in. Now, kind of the base setup or the base requirements for my exact specific setup are the lights. So these are the Aputure MC Pros, and actually Aputure sent me those a while ago to test them out in the context of live visuals and Resolume and stuff. But back then they weren't quite useful because the main way you could control them was either just directly here via those controls and the app. There was some DMX settings you had, but they always had DMX smoothing on. So whenever you would change any values quickly, it would smooth them out, and that would make it quite useless, to be honest, for Resolume. But now they added a firmware update beginning of the year where you can actually have a lot more control over all of the DMX settings, and you can also disable the DMX moving. And this is great news because now they're actually super useful to just hook up directly to Resolume or MadMapper or any other video software that can also output DMX and kind of combine them with video, And so in my case, I am controlling them with the Astera box because that is actually a wireless DMX, so CRMX transmitter as well. And so it doesn't have to be specifically Astera tubes. You can control any CRMX capable lights with this thing, which is exactly what we're going to do with that. Now the input here is 5-pin DMX, and Resolume can only output ArtNet. So I'm using this NTech DMX node right here, which can convert the ArtNet DMX into this 5-pin DMX out. So this is basically my DMX node. And now here we also have the Roland TR-6S drum machine, which is connected via USB MIDI to the Resolume computer. And each one of the faders, you can see can actually control my layers inside Resolume, and triggering each one of those instruments will also trigger the clip, and we're going to cover that in a second. But first, let's see how we can actually connect the Aputure MC Pros with the Astera box and set them up to the right mode for Resolume. So on these, you want to make sure that you're on the latest firmware update, because that's where you have access to the advanced DMX settings. And you want to head into the DMX settings, go into the DMX settings, and then here you can set a DMX address and a DMX profile. Now, the best mode that I figured for Resolume is, so most of these modes are very film-based. It's not the RGB mode that you would expect, but more in like color temperature and that kind of stuff. So the best mode for Resolume is actually mode 4, which is RGB, but it has 5 channels. The first one is actually the brightness, then you have RGB, and then the 5th channel is the strobe. And we can set dummy channels inside of Resolume to make use of those, or to, basically ignore those channels. And we're going to have a look at that in a second as well. But you can select this mode 4, go back, and then set the DMX address. So basically the first one for me is going to be the 1, and then the second one is going to be 6, and so on. So you can address all of your lights this way. And I'm pretty sure that this is also possible in the same way in the app. And then also here in the DMX smoothing, you can set this to off. And so that way, if you strobe, it will actually strobe and not create any smoothing in between. Now we can head into the CRMX settings, and here you can set it to CRMX unlink, and that will put it into a link mode, basically, where it's actively looking for a signal to link until it connects with something that can send the CRMX signal to the light. And so in that case, this is going to be our Astera box. And to create the link, you can just press the CRMX button here, the green one, and you can already see that now it is sending out the link signal and it's already linked. So you can do that for all of the lights and they should all connect. So you actually don't have to go inside the settings of the app or anything. You can do it all just by pressing this link button here, and that's pretty much it. So it's quite a simple process, but actually, to be honest, figuring out this for the first time is can be so frustrating, because you're looking inside of the app, or like you're trying, especially if you're doing it with Astera tubes, you're trying to like connect the lights with the app, but CRMX is actually a completely different signal than what's happening inside of the app. So just be aware of that the CRMX link, and this also goes for the Astera tubes, it's just happening via this button. So let's have a quick look of the physical connection that we need here. Basically, we have a network adapter. Now, don't mind this huge 10 gigabit adapter. You, of course, don't need anything fancy like this. I just couldn't find a small one right now. But this is just a USB-C to Ethernet adapter, so nothing fancy. Just mine is a bit oversized. So network is basically going into my DMX node here. And I wrote down the IP address of this. So this will be our output in Resolume, and then this is connected via the via this DMX cable to the Astera box, and the Astera is actually sending it to the actual lights. And so now let's have a look at the actual setup inside of Resolume. The first thing is you need to go into your preferences under Arena Preferences or Command period, Control period on Windows. And then you go into the DMX settings right here. You select the network adapter, which in our case is the Thunderbolt Ethernet slot 1, whatever your network adapter is. And then we can head into the advanced output right here. So at first we're only going to have a screen. We actually don't need the screen at all. We just need a new DMX Lumiverse. So hit the plus icon, DMX Lumiverse. We can delete our screen. And because I already created a fixture for the MC, it actually now is already set to that. But you won't have that, so you want to head to the right here. And under Fixtures, you have all of the fixtures that you have available. Now, these are basically different lighting fixtures with different amounts of pixels and stuff like that. In our case, one light is only 1 pixel, but it has 5 channels. So we want to set that up in the settings icon here. Now you want to click that, and sometimes this will open up in the background. So you want to move your advanced output window. And here you can see that I already have this MC Pro fixture type. Now, let me just create a new one. And I'll just call it MC Pro 2 just to show the whole setup. And we have 5 channels, right? So we have the first one, which is just our brightness. And we need to create a dummy channel for that inside of Resolume here. So you can click this plus icon down here. And that will create a new kind of empty parameter, and we'll call that brightness. And we'll drag it in front of the pixels of the actual RGB values. And we're gonna put the brightness up all the way to full brightness, because in the end we're controlling the brightness anyway through the RGB values. Like if all of those are at 0, there will be no brightness. So we can ignore this and just set it at a constant brightness for all of the lights. And the same goes for the strobe. We don't really want to use it, or in fact we have no way of using it inside of Resolume, because you can only output RGB values for fixtures. So we just want to leave the strobe channel at 0, but we need the channel because otherwise the channel count would be wrong if we create, some new fixtures. So we'll just call that strobe. That's this channel. And the color format, let me just check, is RGB. That is correct, yes. So we can select this fixture, we can close it, go back into our advanced output. So here we have our pixel, and you need to select the fixture type here. So MC Pro, in this case, is our fixture that we selected, and the first channel is in fact one that is correct. And so now it's actually really easy, because you just, let me maybe just make that a bit bigger, just so we can see it a bit better. And now you can just duplicate that with Command D, and it will automatically create the new fixtures with the correct channels. Now, because I am using 6 in total right now, and the drum machine also has 6 outputs, I'm gonna stick with 6. And yeah, the layout isn't perfect right now, but for the tutorial's sake, that's more than enough. And yeah, that's all for the advanced output. Well, actually, it's not all. We want to select our target IP, which is already detected here. Now, one important thing that I didn't mention yet is you want to head in your network settings. You want to select your network adapter, and you want to put it into the same IP range that the DMX node is, right? So I know, and I wrote this on the back of my DMX node, the IP address. So for this NTech node, I have it in this range. So you basically set the range to the same, and then just give it a unique IP address. And the subnet mask in this case is 255 and 0 for the rest. So just make sure that you are in the same network as your DMX node. And then you should be able to see it here now. Sometimes it doesn't show up and you have to type the IP address manually, but ideally it should show up here. And then you can also select the subnet and universe, but in our case, this is all, or in my case, this is all 0. So that's all for the setup in the advanced output. So we can save and close this. And now what we want to do is actually I want to create an individual layer for each one of those lights. And this layer should only play in the area that our light is, right? So the easiest way to just to map that color or that solid to this area specifically is a slice transform. So in here in the slices, you can actually just transform it into the shape of those slices. Now, if you don't have this window, you can go here into View and then Show Slices. So if you activate this, then you're able to see your slices. Now I can drag my first slice or my first light fixture onto the solid, and you can already see that this is now perfectly fit into our input of the light that we created in the advanced output. And so I can actually repeat this for all of my individual lights. In fact, just gonna make the color white for now. And I'm gonna repeat that process for all of those later. The other thing that we want is that once the light is triggered, so we're gonna send a MIDI note that activates the clip, right? But it should just flash and then go back to black, so fade out. And a quick way to do that is actually directly in the color settings of the solid color. And in fact, the reason why I don't want to do it with the opacity, I'm going to show you in a moment. Because if we go in here into the solid, click RGB, we have the color channels of our solid, and then we also have the alpha, so the opacity. And we can animate this by clicking this icon right here, go to timeline, and you can see that now it animates from 0 opacity to 100, but we can easily reverse that by going into the settings again and setting up an envelope. And so now here you can see the animation timeline. Let me just make that a bit bigger so we can properly see all of this. And so instead of going from 0 to 100, I want to have it go from 100 to 0. And I also want it to have a curve, so like an exponential out in this case. And so that way, once it's activated, it flashes and it goes to 0. Now this is still too long, so I'm going to set the seconds to 1. And this is already quite nice, so it's a nice little bump right here. The only thing is it's still looping, so I'm just going to set that to play once and hold. And this way we have a nice quick little flashing animation. And now the reason why I'm doing this in the color settings instead of the solid settings of the whole clip is that I can actually save a preset for this. So right here you can see that we have our presets, and in fact I already saved one called bump, but I'm just gonna create a new one, call it bump 2, save that, and so that way we can easily copy that to all of the other layers without having to repeat this whole process. So now let me just go into my sources, and I can just drag my solid with the bump effect already on it into the second layer. And so that way you can see that if I activate this, it's already has the same effect applied. Now the last thing we need to apply to this is also the transformation. So I'm just gonna drag the slice 2 on it, and so I can repeat this for all of those clips. This is gonna be slice 3, slice 4, and so on. So once you will have this, and so once you did all of that, it will look something like this. Now I also created some thumbnails so I can see it. You can do that by pressing Command-Shift-T. If I activate it in the same moment, then quickly hit Command-Shift-T, it will show up all of my positions of the lights. And so that's the setup for the lights. And in fact, you can already see that if I trigger one of those, it already triggers the corresponding light. Now the last thing that I want is to connect it with the drum machine. And so for that, the first thing that I needed to do is to download the driver. And so on the Roland website, you can download the driver for your operating system. I will link the link to this download page in the description. And once you download it and install that driver, the computer will automatically detect the drum machine as a MIDI source. So once it's plugged in, you can head into the, not in these settings, actually in the Arena settings. So go into the preferences, head to MIDI, and here you can see that we can see our TR-6S as a device, and then also the control, which we don't need in our case right now. So I'm gonna have MIDI input and output. The output is not really necessary. This actually is funny because it sends back the trigger. So in fact, if I trigger the clips here, it will also trigger the kick drum on the drum machine. So this might also be a fun little way of maybe even creating kind of like your sequences in Resolume or stuff like that. Could be an interesting experience, but technically for this, we don't even need the MIDI output, just the input. So you want to activate that. And so now what we want to do here on the drum machine is I am going to go into Shift and Instant Play, which gives me direct control over all of the instruments right here as buttons, so I can send the MIDI values in an easy way to Resolume. So just want to activate the MIDI mapping mode in Resolume with Command-Shift-M, and then click. Let me just quickly delete some of those so I can show it. Just click the first one and select the bass drum right here. Second layer, activate the snare, and so on. So you want to do the mapping for all of those. And then you can close it. And so you can see that this now actually activates all of the lights, which is pretty nice. That's super fun. And now already, if I start playing this, this is working nicely, but one problem, if I turn all of the faders down and I play, it is still playing all of them. because it is still sending the MIDI information, right? So what I want is that these faders are actually also controlling the master fader of my individual channels right here. And to do that, you want to go here under the utility, go to the MIDI settings, and then there's this one setting called transmit edit data, and this you want to turn on. So this will also transmit any data that is edited with like the knobs and stuff like that, which is exactly what we need. So that way, now if I go into my MIDI mapping and I activate, let me just also delete those just so you can see it. And if I slide this first fader, you can see that is actually sending MIDI information. Because otherwise we wouldn't receive those signals like the program, the change of those faders. So you need to activate that setting just to be able to see this channel. And once you did that for all of those channels, you can see that we can now also control our layer opacity with these faders. So now actually if I only play the kick drum, it will only play the kick drum on the light as well. And yeah, that's basically it. Super fun technique. And this is, you know, as audio reactive as it gets. So just had a lot of fun playing around with this little setup. So here's just a quick demo of the whole setup with the lights in action. Have fun jamming, leave a like and subscribe, and see you next time.